So, good evening, everyone. And this is a very, very different event. And so we changed the program. I will not welcome you because this is the privilege of our dear Crispin Clay. Crispin Clay was born in November 1944 in Lusaka, the capital of the British colony of Northern Rhodesia, now Zambia, the youngest child of colonial administrator Gervas Clay, and Betty, the youngest child of Robert, Lord Baden-Powell, British hero of Mafeking in 1902, and 5 years later, the founder of the worldwide Boy Scouts movement. Crispin went to school in Natal, South Africa, and in Zimbabwe, graduated in Wales in 1967, taught English at St. Tauros High School in Windhoek, 1970 to 1973, married a German Namibian teacher and moved to Lüderitz. He bought a retail liquor business, which he ran for 39 years, during which time he was deeply involved in the Lüderitzbucht Foundation's efforts to promote the town. He arranged the town's centenary festival in 1983 and the Dias 500 festival in 1988. He wrote the libretto for a modern musical, Sing-a-Song of Dias, for the Drakensberg Boys Choir, which toured internationally with it as part of the Dias Festival. Crispin retired in 2012 and stayed busy with Lüderitzbucht projects like Dias Point restoration, guiding local tours, photography, and writing. One of the main reasons he came to Lüderitzbucht until he was stopped by a left paralyzing stroke in July 2020. He's currently working on a book of stories, photos, and poems connected in some way to Dias, which keeps expanding, also on a collection of poems. Completion expected in 2022-23. These readings are selected poems of Crispin's with introductory anecdotes. And with this, we leave it to the entertainer of the evening. You hear who we have, and we are so privileged. Give him a round of applause.
You have the microphone switched off. I would like to say something. Is it on or isn't it? Yay. Am I clear at the back? Yay. I particularly wish to give a very warm welcome and much appreciation for the presence of my ex-pupils, Judge Couture van Niekerk. Truly an honor, Your Honor. Dr. Rodney Lichtman, one of my top scouts and top pupils, and now chief of the ICU at Lady Pahamba Private Hospital. He's also a top anesthetist. I think he must have found a better way of putting people to sleep than listening to old Clay reading poetry. To a dear friend and colleague and my best man at our wedding, Ebbe Hoffman, later editor of the Allgemeine Zeitung, and now retired man at large. Also to my ex-pupil and my wife's ex-pupil, Manfred Lort. He leaves an indelible image, this Manfred. I can always see him striding down what's now Independence Avenue, striding down Kaiser Street as if he were the Kaiser himself, swinging his beautiful drum major's baton and plonking it down every so many yards and flinging it in the air with great aplomb and catching it, of course. And that is my eternal memory of Manfred, who now CEO, has been for years, CEO of African Packaging, and I don't know what else he does because I have rather lost touch with him lately. That has been the problem over the years. Lüderitz is closer than you think. It's just the return journey so far. And that's what puts people off, apart from a thing that they call a wind. Well, I tell you this, I'd rather have the wind than rain any day. To dear friends, especially of my sons and ex-choirman of the Cantare Ardieri, Lucas Buchers, thank you and your family for being here and supporting me. Manuel Coelho, Inge Glauer, Judy Hurd, Whitney Unkes, Dagmar Kessler, Bertrand Kors. So many names here. Edna was Lohmann, and Mariana Camara from Lüderitz. Lovely to see you all. Hannelore Petzo, my inspiration and physiotherapist, without whom I would not have been here tonight. Lotte and Inge Röhrkohl, known you for 100 years, it seems, and you're still going strong. And to my wife's dear cousin, Ilse Teschner, thank you so much for being here. And so many others who I half recognize. I think that's Frank Stefan there, but I'm not sure. And others, and thank you so much for coming. It's a great pleasure. And now a little bit of officialese. Notice, I, Crispin David Powell Clay, hereby assert and give notice of my rights under international law to be identified as the author of these poems with titles and anecdotes. CDP Clay, copyright, Lüderitz, Namibia, July 2022. Right, this is in 4 parts, 2 halves and understandably 4 quarters, almost equal in length. The first part is laugh, sob, itch. Laugh is a sob and an itch. That's what laugh is, isn't it? First one is genii aroma. Those of you who still retain some Latin will know what genii aroma is, the stench of inspiration. I have at times thought more impressive and wonderful and perfectly brilliant thoughts than these, and brilliantly expressed, but did not at the time of thought have near me either pen or pad. So those thoughts have left for the limbo of lost potential and forgotten genius, and all I have left is a feeling of regret and this. The unforgiving minute, taken as you know from the end of Rudyard Kipling's poem, If you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours will be the earth and everything that's in it. And which is more, is it? You'll be a man, my son. My caviar to the general, my pearls before kine, essentially ephemeral, ridiculous, sublime, intended to amuse, perhaps at times confuse, delight and embrace with riddles or some trace of ancient echoed rhythms or long forgotten tunes or some obscure illusions like water tumbled stones, a flash of light in darkness, a wave or fleeting smile. If you should feel a tingle, this minute was a mile. I start what will be quite a variety show gently in my shallow end, moving deeper and deeper as I got older. The romantic poet Wordsworth described prose as words in the best order. Poetry or emotions recollected in tranquility as the best words in the best order. In between the two comes doggerel, satirical heroic couplets, or rhyme, or verse, or worse. Take your pick here, remembering poetry does not have to rhyme. Listen for and imagine what is being described. Brought up mostly near the Zambezi and having, aged 5, been to its source in the extreme northwest corner of Zambia, I grew up thinking of it as my immortal river. Challenged in my final term at boarding school to write a poem, it was my first choice of topic, especially since it had just had two massive floods, the first in 1958, doubling previous highest levels of the river, the next year doubling that again, proving local comment that their river god, the huge snake Nyami Nyami, was angry. I flew from Livingston to Kariba to then Salisbury, now Harare, to school. I saw that new dam wall dramatically inundated. Zambezi, written in 1962. High in the swamps of an African jungle, where tropical thunder and old drums rumble, and teak and mahogany cover the sky, trickles gentle a stream where crocodiles lie, that mingles with more from the overgrown ground, and grows as it flows past the marshes all round, then curves west and south, growing wider and deep, with tributaries where the sleek tigerfish leap, where kingfishers plummet and fish eagles soar, while elephants trumpet and far lions roar, and the wildfowl whistle as they flight overhead, silhouetted in sunset, reflected in red, in the floodplains and channels as the river pours south over rapids and drifts, where the hippos play mouth. Zambezi flowing onward through forest, hill, and plain, and tumbling over rapid rocks and swinging on again. This is our great river, bringing life to all the land, rolling, racing, roaring over mud and rock and sand, to Moziwatunya, those great majestic falls, where mile wide now it crashes down through massive granite walls. There boiling and turmoiling over precipice and chasm, then coiling round and onward with heaving rush and spasm, the serpent in its confines rages on in frantic throes, resisting all opposers, like Umzilikat's his foes, crushing and annihilating, bearing all before, while surging ever onward as it would for evermore. Yet see, the river widens as at mouth before its time. Proud rebel, man gainst nature has committed this great crime, has stopped the raging waters, controls the desperate flow. Frustrated at Kariba now, a lake begins to grow. The river god is angered, and in vengeance sends a flood to crush this hindrance built by man with flesh and sweat and blood. With cataclysmic floods it tries to reassert its pride. 2 seasons spent in vain attempt to push this wall aside, and then concedes, subsiding, that man has won this fight, demands but that an outlet be provided for its might. So now beyond the moody lake, beyond Kariba's wall, past rapids, on through gorge and plain, to meet the ocean's squall, the great Zambezi, pacified, flows onward to the sea. The eternal flow exhilarates all those like you and me who experience all its dangers, its might and boundless wonder, and man the witness, is inspired to pause a while and ponder. A month later, I was on my way to the United Kingdom to try to get into university. As the train crossed the dear old Victoria Falls Bridge on my way to catch a ship in Cape Town, I swore that I would be back within 5 years. I was. I spent 18 months cramming in London and got into the 20th university I applied to in Wales. At the end of my first year, I took a 7-week hitchhiking holiday in Iceland, which I loved. On the ferry back to Edinburgh, I met a girl. And Henry Vaughan's 1650 poem, The World, sparked this, The Search, September 1965. I saw eternity the other night, the poet said. I saw it too the other night in the eyes of a girl. They gave a name to that rare human being, but always in my mind, my souvenir of her will be that distant view, 1 second long, of one small candle flame of hope within the vacuum of humanity. I saw her smile and felt within me warmth, a glow which grew and slowly lit my smile. My searching eyes on her hair-flickered face shut out the world as we spoke all words in the touch of fingertips. We watched the sea, we two, flow past into infinity. We watched the stars drop curtain mists of faint auroras, curling into nothingness across the ice-clear Westman sky. We watched New Surtsey's temper, Iceland's winking distance. Then I saw through time and watched the sunrise of eternity as she turned and I slid down her eyes. Sob, sob. 'Twas a swift infatuation, swiftly kiboshed next day. End of story. Sob. Cheer up. After graduating, I couldn't wait to get back to Africa. In October 1967, I did. Not to dreary, icy horizontal Welsh drizzle, but to a good cracking tropical thunderstorm like a young bull elephant. Our toilet seat in the bush camp was the jawbone of an elephant in an open door toilet overlooking hippos in the marshes of the Kwando River, the border between southwestern Zambia and southeastern Angola. Storm from the jawbone of an elephant. Here I sit under Barotse thatch, listening to the last large drops from the trees and to the fading, triumphant rumble and flicker of a frivolous giant of a storm bounding from east to west. Just 2 hours ago, a long dreamed of cloudless, dazzling sky quietly gave place to the shadow of this galumphing, exuberant cloud as it swaggered and blustered closer. It tried first to impress with a slamming blast of wind, which merely sent a few frightened, flimsy branches diving for cover and some burnt, intimidated trees abjectly to their knees. The marsh reeds, used to these antics from the east, turned their backs disdainfully towards the giant's advance and insolently looked to the west to admire its flouncing exit with the sun. Sinjembela, Southwest Zambia, December 67. I was terribly disappointed to discover in the year and a half back in my born home country that it had changed in atmosphere dramatically after independence in 1964. Next door, Rhodesia had declared unrecognized independence, which closed the borders and sealed off my Victoria Falls with high security fences. For a year, I helped supervise a spraying program against tsetse fly at Kariba. Then it rained for days, non-stop. I counted them in my 1968 diary the other day. 15 days in November, 14 days in December, non-stop. By then, Zambia was no longer home to me. I felt uncomfortable and unwanted, whatever my qualifications or attitude. After wet Wales, I decided to look for somewhere in the world where it did not rain. So I left. On finally leaving home, Zambia, May 1969. Yet a little while, my love, but I must turn and go. A little while of loving you in vain, in pain and vanished hopefulness. A little while in days, not months or years, and then my face shall turn and we be close no more. I started young in loving you, from knee-high mischievous to teenage parting tears, through years of closer binding, wondering and love, and thoughts of ever sun-blessed you, dumbfounded my infatuated youth. We parted first, and longing nights and days away possessed my soul and haunted me with distant scenes, all calling home the lonely heart with memories of you. I saw you smiling in the sunset, warm and glowing, with my falls at your feet, their thunder insistent on my instant return, and the promising rainbow complete and reflected, repeated the call and reflected the peace, repeated my oath and remembered my love. And from the dark land enlightened I came to find my love again, my ever sun-blessed you. And finding you with water at your feet, encaged, my love, and enraged in this pain, I turned again to wait for you anew, and to the lovable west I flew, to memories of home and long lost you. But the time of dark and dark of time has seen a change. My love has changed and betrayed my waiting years and hopefulness. And I heard her voice and dared not know it hers. And yet, my love, I hope. But then she looked on me, and in her eyes a new and sneered resentment shone, which seared my love and melted it, a candle in the dawn. Ah, so, my love, my first love dead is you in ignorance of love. And these, your lovers, all with eyes of greed and tongues of other sounds, will use you coldly, O my love, where I caressed with mutual love. And yet, your face under heavens of blue, under sunsets of crimson with gold in your hair, under stars, in the cool singing night in the wild is the same, my beloved. And a small, plaintive child can be heard from the west crying, Lama Sabachthani, in the tongue I knew best. Just a little while, my love, and I must turn and go in anguish, not in anger, for the loss of my love. Now better, beloved, with our past in the past, to remember contented, though longing may last, to remember that smell of raindrops on sand, to remember, and the nights all alone, and the songs of our land, of our lake and our river, our falls at your feet, But remember, my country, no more shall we meet. Sorry. That brings me to a point, dear friends, where I think I must say, make this quite clear. I make no apology for making you laugh. Likewise, I make no apology for making myself weep. Change of scene. After a holiday in England, I returned to the Cape to search for my new home in the sun. I was staying for a month, quote, or until it rains, in a small boarding hotel when a school bus of boys from Windhoek moved in for a soccer tour. One of the staff was a gorgeous blonde bombshell, of whom I was, as usual, petrified. One evening, I was reading in bed when I heard a train with an old steam engine coming fast towards the hotel. But there were no rail lines anywhere at Muley Point, so I got up, checked, and saw nothing. Not a leaf stirred. A minute later, my bed and the cupboard started shaking like mad. Earthquake, I thought, and ran downstairs fast. It was. We stood around chatting outside, and then Blondie arrived from a concert in town, having nearly been crushed by a chandelier. I had applied for a job in the city with an advertising firm, and my interviewer had told me to write a sonnet to check my use of words. For now I had a memorable subject to describe in the style of Gerard Manley Hopkins on tremors. You can Google Tulbach 6.3 earthquake, 10:04 p.m., 29th September 1969. I met her and the earth shook. On tremors. Thrice thunder quaked, sunder cracked, hills, homes, relax, tense. In tents now, their men gnomes, small, huddled, fear-fuddled, shaking men with Christ in concrete memories, no, not again scream, with that night's, next night's, rushing, crashing, thousands things, and cots, hells, houses, shells, and lights of spark flames as the hill winds find wings. This quiet, oh cautious, calm silence, stretching ears, hears yet again the roar of rumbling roofs, tumbling timbers, walls crumbling into screaming mouths. The sense of safety in bright lights that fail shocks to the core as broken Tulbach series Wolseley, each town falls. Technical warning. In my next poem, I discover the attractions of the 16th and 17th century poetic conceit or extended metaphor, often using hyperbole or gross exaggeration for vividness, sometimes verging on the absurd, especially in anthropomorphic or humanly personified metaphors. I leave it to you to decide where it illustrates or confuses. An earthquake is utterly confusing and terrifying in one's absolute human helplessness. Earthquake. Smile not in safety, friend, at trembling of our hills, nor wince nor weep in comfort for our lost. Do not smile when dogs turn wild, when steeples pirouette to dust, when cupboards teeter and walls erupt, friend, do not smile. There came a calm of fear, a vacuum, silence and a stillness in the night, with torture in the earth and groaning in the ground before the noise of wind, sans wind, crashed over us, slowly, tiredly, blurred in the shuddering of earth. The walls subside and roofs lean crumbling to the floors. You smile, you wall above me now. You shake and grin and groan at me, and as your laughing mouth cracks wider, slowly bend your kiss to seal my scream and sigh to silent darkness now. In haze of dust and pain you lie, collapsed upon me, bent and twisted too. You never bled before, but now this wetness soaks me head to foot, blood squeezed from stone. Can't move to help to raise you, raised, you hold me tight, so tight, and tighter now you squeeze my breathing, crush my bones and tear my skin. Dear God, this weight and bursting out my ears, skull twisting slowly, crushing under bricks. And can I smile, surviving at our loss, or see you smile with pictures on your walls? Remember, if that silence in that calm comes now again upon us, friend, we will not smile nor hope in safety then. Just run! And you did laugh, gotcha. But that's the point. When an earthquake strikes, you get a shock like that, jump and run. Don't wait for it. 2 weeks later, it rained all over the Cape. So I paid my bill, took my old battered blue suitcase, put my thumb in the air, and 14 hours driving later, I saw Windhoek for the first time. I stayed for a week in the old Grossherzog Hotel before I phoned the blondie, Orty, who arranged interviews for me with principals. Centaurus State English Medium High School offered me the post of acting senior English teacher as from 10th of January 1970. I accepted. I enjoyed exploring Windhoek on foot, usually ending up at the old municipal swimming pool near the school. Newcomers will know my feelings. New in town, Windhoek, October 1969. Stalk, stranger, down the pavements then, and watch the people passing you, and hear their lightness light their laughs, but not with you. Stalk on in hope to share a smile, to break this wall between them all and you, to dare a word and watch new eyes smile welcoming. Sit silent in the restaurants and bars, unnoticed by the private rings of friends, and watch aloof, objective, and afraid of loneliness. But don't be bored while being ignored. With friends, you would glare at a stranger's stare. There will be smiles again, and laughter in the air, and all with you. I started teaching and helping supervise the boys' hostel. But here I'm going to go a bit off script and say, this laughing, I must give a shout out to dear old friend David Gamzu and all those dear friends, so many gone. You heroes of Windhoek's Round Table, Knights of the Round Table, who started a thing called melodrama And by the time I got interested in 1973, it was called Gay 90s, and soon after called again the Oldie Pub Night. And that's where I learnt that I had laughter in the air and all for me. It had to happen. After a couple of years of failed infatuations, I'm thankful to say none with any of my pupils. On the 12th of May 1971, I set my Standard 9 pupils a challenge. Some of you here might remember that, Mike. Write a sonnet within the 80 minutes of a double English period. I did it too, with a sonnet to my future unknown wife called Caged Ecstasy. Exactly a year later, after 2 years of silence, blonde bombshell Orty phoned me to ask if I would escort her and her aunt from Pretoria to the Windhoek Carnival Ball. The aunt had come in on the inaugural flight of the first jumbo Boeing 747 jet from Joburg. I was on duty in the hostel, so very sadly had to decline, but soon made a date with her, and she helped with the costumes when I acted in Hamlet in June 1973, when they reconstituted the old theatre and made it into the new National Theatre across the road here. In early 1973, she invited me on a trip to the Okavango, and it was on that trip that I fell for her big time. My sonnet came true. Caged Ecstasy. Remember, then I had no idea she was going to be my wife. Encage my soul with barbs of beauty, love. Restrain my wanderlusting eyes with strands of steel in sunlit smiles and counterpupils of calm harmony. Imprison in your hands of gentle crushing love my lost free heart. Recalled from vacant, aimless space in haste from waste, to linger now submingled part of all your world, from freedom new released. So exalted, halted, battered, weary I, resigned my heart's soul's quest in joy. Thus wounded, healed of hurts of lonely days, I wandered in the rainbow of her eyes, full circle round the edge of love's abyss, surrendered, slave, subdued by one caress. We married in September and moved to Lüderitz. You may want to know, why did I give up teaching? People have often asked us. Well, teaching drove me to drink, in a manner of speaking. No, I had applied every year that I was at St. Horace. I'd applied for a senior assistantship of English. I'd been doing the acting job as offered at the beginning as acting senior English teacher and not getting a cent for it until I had my 4 years experience and I got my teaching diploma. Well, 1973, I was doing my teaching diploma through UNISA, and at the end of that year, I would have had that UED teaching diploma. So I asked through various sources at St. Horace, through the staff and through the headmaster, what are my chances of actually getting this post? Now I'm getting married, and being married on this pittance of a salary is a luxury I can't afford. So the answer came back to me pretty indisputably: you will never get promotion in this department. And I said, oh, why not? Because you're not South African. Yes, that was it. That was the attitude then. I'm sure Evie will bear me out. That was the priority then. So I stormed up to the head of uh, to the director of education, Mr. Kruger, up at the Tintenpalast. I stormed into his office and his secretary bustled out and said, "Oh, stop, 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 you can't go in there." And I said, "Is that Mr. Kruger's office?" "Yes, but he's busy. He's a busy man." I said, "So am I a busy man." This is in the middle of marking the mock matric papers. And I was livid. And he came out saying, "What's the problem?" And I said, "I'm your problem." And I explained who I was. I said, "I'm one of your lowly, underpaid teachers at St. Horace High School. And I've been applying for this job for the last 4 years. And each year I've been told, when I got my DED, when I got my 4 years experience, then I'll be seriously in the running." And having done the job for 4 years, I thought, well, I've got it in it. That's a piece of cake. And I said, "Now I gather that I'll never get it because I don't have a South African passport." He said, "Well, I'm afraid that's a regulation." I said, "Damn dumb regulation, Mr. Clare." He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "You mean to say that your department's best priority over English speaking, going back, I don't know, 32 generations of being English speaking, and going to a British university and getting an English honors degree, and it doesn't compete with a South African passport?" I said, "You can stick your South African passport. I'm resigning now." He said, "Well, what about the gentleman's agreement?" I said, "What gentleman's agreement?" "Oh, that you give us 3 months notice." I said, "Oh, I hadn't noticed you guys being particularly gentlemanly in this case. But however, I'm not on permanent conditions. I'm on temporary conditions. That means 24 hours notice. You're getting my 24 hours notice now." He said, "No, it's got to be in writing through your headmaster." I said, "He'll have it on his desk at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning." And I said, "And by the way, I'm also pulling out of the hostel. So you're going to have to find a new supervisor for that too." "No, but what about the kids? What about your children?" I said, "Did you say children? Did I hear the word children?" "Yes, Mr. Clare." I said, "Oh, is that what this is all about?" I had wondered whether it had anything to do with children. For their sake, because I've been teaching some of them for 2-3 years, I will finish marking their mock matric papers. Those I fail, Mr. Career, will fail, whatever you want to condone. Those that pass, I'm happy to say, will pass. And I shall pass those that I think are worthy of passing. That is my standard. You obviously have forgotten what the word means." I turned right and I stormed out of there. Didn't make any difference. He found a suitable replacement, didn't he, Mr. West? Dr. Professor West, sorry. Within days, I believe. However, I was quite happy to go. My father-in-law, bless his soul, found 2 options for me: either a bookshop, which wasn't a bookshop. It sold comics as its form of books. And I said to myself, I'm not going to be selling pencils and envelopes for the rest of my life. But liquor now, that was the other option. There was a liquor store, but it was 3 times the price. But I said, no, that's worth it. I always wanted to study wines, and I can do it with a good conscience. And it can be a tax write-off too. Yeah, good idea. So we bought the bottle store, which I ran for 39 years. And 3 years later, it went bankrupt. Cheers. So we married in September and moved to Lüderitz. Settling down there, I started to think and act more creatively. I had at St. Horace put on some plays which were very successful at the time. One of them was The Boy Comes Home, and that we won the competition here in Southwest for an English one-act play, and we took it down to the South African 10-year Republic Festival. in Cape Town. And we had a lot of fun, didn't we? Just visiting a winery at Stellenbosch. Do you remember that, Mike? I started getting deeply involved in trying to revive Lüderitz and trying to get my intended flow of words going. My biggest challenge, typical Buchter boredom and selfish laziness. Oops. Hence the next one, an itch of insight. Laughs of itch. Itch means curiosity. Which are you? All change? Question. It's the clock that does it, this ticking along on the rails of time, on the worm-like train of what happens next. There are those on the train looking out at the world, just admiring the view in a satisfied way, rather smug, rather dull, rather dead in a way, but enjoying the world of their days as it goes complacently by. There are those on the train counting telegraph poles, or the stations they pass, or the bridges they cross as they come or before. There are those who ignore with an indifferent glance what is passed by the train while they work on a file or plan what to do when the train pulls in. There are those on the train who believe that they know when the train's getting in and the track that it's on. There are also a few on the train and outside who have plans of their own for the others inside. And where do you stand as the train thunders on? Or do you merely sit and watch the ash fall, the smoke curl, the glow grow as the clock ticks on? Do you try, like me, just to look the other way till a bridge blows apart or the doors slide aside and we all tumble out or the fallout falls? "1983, just after the, I must say, another, say so myself, successful 10-day festival that we put on, didn't we, Abby? We went, my family and I went to Europe, and my wife and I went as tourists to Italy. Via Roma, 1983. Imagine, from Lüderitz to Rome. My God, must I be afraid to face my God? For while I stare at skies and Michelangelos and Pope and palaces and pristine plastic places and basilicas, I know he stares at me with one of his eternal eyes. Yes, stars are some, and he who looks at them gets looked at back. And all the while, my only thought is, oh my God, I'm only me, you see, not one of your stars. "14th to 15th November 1979, I turned 35. This is called a special delivery. The name of the flick. I could have gone to Flick tonight and seen my birthday in alone, on coming out alone, alone. I could have watched this evening two complete unknowns in some unknown, and I don't really want to know or want to see, endure it film the night before my 35th reminder of that unknown scene when I hope, became a star, short-lived perhaps, but in my own small way a star, not quite the hero, but at least not quite the villain of the piece, whatever else I later did. That day was my first part upon this pantomimic stage of life, this theater of absurdity. And so instead of flick tonight, I've poured myself some good red wine and toasted all those years away, these tasty years away, and swallowed 35 times to wash them down. And if my late development should now, this dawning year of mine, give vent to what I have and can, it will not be a wasted night, but something of a birth, perhaps, not mere ephemerality, but something that I humbly hope will be of pride to those to whom I hope I was and will be still, and will itself in years to come be what I could have seen tonight, a special delivery. Within weeks, we started a civic action to save Lüderitz, leading to the establishment in March 1980 of the Lüderitzbucht Foundation. And I even started writing at last. No comprendo. Oh, do not let me be understood. Please do not understand me, for he made me. So how could you begin to comprehend the way I comprehend what is, which is, it's him. But he is more than it or is, by more than your infinity, eternity, or space, or time, or size, or any form of energy at all. For he is more than all he does, like love, or says in all his ways, like thunder, or makes like galaxies of worlds and waterfalls and ants and you and me. So who are we to query all he makes or says or does, or try to understand it in the least degree? And yet we do, for we are we, and we just do. So since we do, please try to understand little me, but do not think you have, even should you think you have. Part one, that was wandering and wondering. Now comes part two, whispers in the wind in Lüderitz, the Bucht, or as I see it. Wandering and wondering in Lüderitz. Desert Coast. This is a series, a cycle it's called in poetry, a cycle of poems called Desert Coast. Desert Coast Gem. Dawn. There's a bright, high half moon overhead. Above the lighthouse, Venus fades, veiled in a sinking sash of slowly seaward sinking, purple burning air, as sunrise lights the dust and mist, and deep, now paling blue below the sash, subsides into the growing grey of daylit distant hills, while from the islands to the north, incessant hordes and chords of cormorants weave in waves to choruses of croaks from gannets, gulls, and terns all round, and up and down the still lagoon, and out across the bay. Seal Island's crust of white is rusty now, Shark Island stark behind now scarlet steel giraffes that dwarf the yachts beyond the wharf. The first foams flash and splash and spout on Penguin Island's face as infant gales exhale their first cool gulps of sand sea salted air. Now spotlights peering through between the dunes reveal the redly rippled slopes, fixed tidal waves they seem of sand advancing on the sea across the bay. the silent spire, adoring hands, adorns the dawning skyline of the town, as morning's born in glory from the clouds that ring the bay. And now that sash of purple air itself is paling in the west, and daylight's hazy, searing sky restores to white, black, brown, and grey the ancient, baking, blasted rocks and points and islands close across the bay. Desert coast peace. Have you ever listened to the peace of the world? Have you ever felt it or watched its hues, not as a screech from a mindless mob, nor a meaningless manhandled word in the news, but peace in the ear as the sand dunes moan, as the southwest wind sings a wild refrain, peace in the smell of the fog-washed air as the mist tumbles up and away into blue, peace in the grumble and swish of the surf as it flops in a furl of white onto green, onto white, onto smooth stretching reaches of beach. Peace in the burst of a broadside of tide as it shatters to spray in a spout from the swell. Peace in the sun setting fire to the dunes in the distance and closer to salt pans and spume. Peace in the weaving of wings in the wind, in the wave of a cormorant V over sea as it dips in a flick for a sip as it glides. Peace in the stillness of dunes in the dark, with the whisper and ripple of sand in a slide, like the sound of a breeze through distant trees. Peace in the eye, as the sand, sea, and sky expand in the mind to the reaches of time, and the soul is alone, where alone is all one. Desert coast gem, succulent. The sand of our moments of life pours past in the blinding blast of the wind of time, and all our gems of sparkling life are caught in passing by the sieve of our mind. Sand sizzles past, hair height along the long lagoon, knees knocked together by the blast, shins grazed by gravel, great grey grains of gale-governed gravel. I huddle fast, face pinched in pin-pricked pain. One eye peers through fingers and grit and gale-sprung tears, and in my soft discomfort almost fails to notice it. You sit there, succulent and green, exposed and stripped of flimsy frills like leaves, yet from the blast that bounces off, you soak your life and live because and not in spite of it. Exclusive recluse that grows alone, without concern for shelter, shade, or rich-fed bed, but draws from sand and sun and wind your life from life. Wind blows, sand flows. Wind dies, sand lies. Fog drifts, dew lifts. Life seeps, green peeps. Roots wind, shoots bind. Such live in my sieve. Desert coast gem, dune mirage, agate beach. I see this morning's slender hands of flowing, mesmerizing sand that lick and flick and float and swerve their whispering way among the dunes and stop me short. There is a sensual stirring curve to dunes which swell and press towards a peak that sloping sleek assumes a humanness as earth's wild breath works over them. And now my fingers feel the sand, the desert's warm and yielding skin, that soft silk, velvet, virgin skin of wind-born dune. These fine and firm and rounded lines of subtle, supple curves against the sky, my inner eye translates into the line and flow and form of lithe and loving limbs. These wisps of fine spray sand, like hair, blonde breeze-blown hair on suntanned skin, unveil a face that leers and dares and shimmers with the heat and light. Sand whispers in the wind to me, like gentle fingers through my hair that stir and tingle endlessly right down my spine. Drive me, you desert winds, along these moving dunes that writhe and sigh in ecstasy beneath your touch, beneath the ever-changing stress of your caress. O kiss of life, revive me now and drive me through the dunes of my desires. Inflame my joy with cauterizing sun. Consume the yearning burning in me now. Let me be strong and firm and wild and ever varied like the wind that makes these silhouettes, these lines, that distant ridge of those first dunes that caught my eye. Desert Coast Gem, swell. Why now? Why now of all, and in this form, do you, you wave of waves, come boiling up from deep, deep down, yes, out of sight or mind, and straight at me from underneath the sea, deep hidden layers of me and distant storms of sea and wind and spray? Why now? Why now, when all I find is sand beneath my feet, and all around is sand, soft sand beneath my feet, and all around that pulls me ever down, and slowly, slowly chokes and slows me far from sea and wind and spray? The sight of you, the sight, yes, just the sight of you from far, was then and now is still a hoping fear, surrender, threat and thrill, an overwhelming burst and surge of surf, a shock that shook and shakes the rocks and me with sea and wind and spray. Then you were there, yes, you were you, and there above me, surging up, submerging view, and hurling high and huge, deluging all, still curling up and up the boiling sea. And now, oh, now you break and throw your power down in sea and wind and spray. Take me, take me, take now this all of me, aches all of me, as now you break at me, as all of you roars pounding in your ears, and pours cascading over, round and through, towards me, over, round and through me, one with sea and wind and spray. Now you wave, you devastating wave, you hold me, fold me, helpless part of you. Now bear me, tear me, drench me, wrench me, surge the surf in curling furls of foam, in ecstasy and cry and sigh and moan of sea and wind and spray. You crash and smash and splash along the shore of all my world, wherever I can see, and as your shock subsides and slides aside, you spread and stretch your nimble fingers out and fumble all the tumbling stones about in sea and wind and spray. And so you whirled and swirled my world around, you wave of waves, and breached and broached and broke and stroked me smooth and soothed me. Feel and heal me now, and know me only wild and free, and soak me wave on wave, and save me now, yes, save me now, you sea and wind and spray. Talking of swells, some of you might remember this. On the 6th of June, 1977, I was phoned in my shop by Philip Ferrier, the lightkeeper on duty at Dyer's Point. I know you're interested in this kind of thing, Crispin. The Foghorn House has gone. Gone? Seems to have been swept right off the top of the point by massive swells. They're still breaking over the top. Come out and see. 30-meter swells, those I must see. My wife and friend and a friend and I, neither of whom could drive, were only able to go out at sunset, unfortunately too late to photograph. As I walked alone across the bridge, I looked up to my left to see a huge wave bearing down on me, a swell like the swell you've just heard. I was in the middle of the bridge, too far from either end to run for safety in time. I had one racing thought. Will this wave now smash the bridge into the sea too, having smashed the old foghorn off the top this morning? And me with it? What a way to go. The wave exploded on rocks 200 meters to my left, sending a mass of foaming sea towards me. It filled the tidal river from bank to bank, surging just under my feet from end to end of the bridge, rinsing my shoes and the planks of the walkway. The bridge held. I ran on across it and up the steps, clambering over the debris onto the concrete plinths on which the old foghorn house had stood. I could barely stand up against the icy wind, so after only a minute or two admiring the scene, I made my wary way back down across the bridge to the car. As I reached the far end of the bridge, another wave went right over the top where I had just been, dragging more debris into the boiling sea below as daylight faded. And how would we have got home, my wife asked, since neither she nor our friend could drive. Well, that wouldn't have been my problem, I retorted. Only afterwards did my brush with death strike me as ironic. I always warn visitors, don't take chances with the waves. What if I had been sitting, as I occasionally did in such wild weather, at the top of the steps up the plinth, sheltered by the turret, reveling in the gale hurtling past me, when suddenly the whole peak of the rock could have been like in a tsunami. No pills cure stupidity. Lesson learned, don't take chances with the sea. I've dreamt vividly about this incident more than once. Swells smashed Dyer's Point, June 77. Sit thrilled, your back against the door of this incongruous old foghorn house, and feel the rising bursts of spray and salt foam suck your gasping laugh. Sit tight atop your rock, apparent safety lies in height, and watch as mesmerizing waves stalk unsuspecting you in droves. Sit stripped of strength, small, pink, and cringing thing, and shake in icy fear and naked helplessness, and retch your heart into your mouth as all the sea heaves up at microscopic you in one magnificent monolithic monster of a wave advancing from and blotting out the west and half the sky. And now, you pink and cringing thing, you face the overwhelming ocean all alone. But you are not Canute or Christ or anything, but you are me. And if I wish to stay me this side of timelessness and miss the instant of extinction, now act as only feeble instinct moves one to react, and that is fast. So the foghorn house is gone, and I, unharmed by nature's threat, thank instinct for my life and God. After that, desert coast echoes. Oh, still small voice of calm, in this raging wind and lashing sea, in the crashing surf and the surging swell, in the screaming of senses and hammering of hearts, shine peace. Flamingos in the pink of health ignore the cold, disdain the wind, and like perpetual question marks on learners' skates, abandon stealth forever and forever searching too. They don't need me to see them so, nor do they care I am or not. Ephemeral intruders, blown by winds of chance and time, we only waft and drift in wisps around these hills, primeval drops in mists of fear. Fog mourns, swell looms and leaps, sand stings, spray weeps on reefs, southwester moans and whines in rage and whispers, we are old, and age like us does wither with wither, where, sad echoes from skulls, you wilderness of winds and bones. My next one, about the lagoon at dawn, only got its final line this month when I came across this note to myself at Easter 1994. A bunch of local louts caught a shark in the lagoon and were playing with it in shallow water, trapped it, chased it, yelling and dancing around it. Then one decided to grab its tail and hang on. It whipped round, took out calf meat to the bone, stripped the leg bare. Not pretty. Blood, screams, yells in front of their kids and wives. The shark got away. Desert Coast Gem, Dawn 2. Who that saw this grey of mist and sea extending down and up to merge as one, that saw the smooth and mirrored blend of sea and land, with only here a hint of sound as fog drips down? Who now, as now appears a faint taint of earthly on the ethereal grey, as pale the daylight grows, and as the now glass-papered sea licks the light lifting breeze? Who now on earth, which sharper now in darker greys and harsher shades, slides into sight, and still as all its millions years, while gossamer drifts and dissipates, awaits the sun and wind? Who now on earth would think, since thought in such a piece is likely to whoever can, who can at least in such a piece, but who on earth in such a piece would ever think blood runs so red, so much, so fast? Good red wine. My wife and son were in the German Alps for Christmas 1983. I was here in Lüderitz, keeping the populace suitably festive. I sent them this reminder of home, for home is where the heart is. There's no Eden. Now nowhere, nowhere golden dawning earth can brag is Eden, now that we are here. Oh no, not even here, where now a single seagull squawks and nearby raucous ravens call their morning warnings. Over there a pall of smoke, a cautious coaster drifts, it seems, in silence on the misty ebb or flow. Not even there, where towering trees climb overpowering peaks into the sky, in autumn falling golds and reds and rusts and freshly fading greens and browns and stark stripped early silver greys, awaiting silent snow. For earth no heaven has, no, nowhere now, no, never had since Noah, nowhere, no, not there, where sturdy trees like dominoes fall prey to gales and gusts that even frighten us for all the winds we know. Not there among the greens and glooms of gushing streams and gulps of tingling air among the Alps, as wreathed in mist and clangs of bells, the yodel yokels lead with yells their floral fattened cattle down at last to winter down below. Now spin the globe, my dears. Try, spin the globe, the world, the earth, and all that therein is. Try there, not there, or here. No, nowhere, there. Oh no. So let the seagulls call above the wind and rocks and beaches of your boyhood, boy. For though you'll find nowhere on earth is heaven for long, sometimes some glimpse of it can let you think it could be here and makes you stay to know. Dear friends, you've been incredibly patient. Thank you. I think we must take a 5-minute break now. Please let's make it 5 minutes. All right. Thank you. On we go. On with the show. That is halfway. Part 3, sorry. Part 3, I start being more creative. In mid 1985, sorry, one at a time, please. In mid 1985, our family was wondering where to send our son Eric to boarding school the following year, 86, since our local school only went to the end of the 6th school year, then called Standard 4. Our first choice had always been St. Paul's College in Windhoek, where my wife Orty had taught for some years, but it had just closed its own hostel. Orty's parents lived in Windhoek, but her stepfather, Uncle Fritz, was on the road a lot, and her mother had a shop in town but did not drive. Now what? By sheer good timing, I was asked to arrange a visit to Lüderitz by the famous Drakensberg Boys Choir from Natal on a concert tour of Southwest Africa. Their posters offered auditions after each concert. We suggested to Eric that since he seemed to have rhythm and a good voice, it was a serious time for a decision, but he must go for an audition if he wanted to get into the choir school. He sang the Südwesterlied, our unofficial national anthem at the time, and was accepted. He can come right now, finish the tour with us, said the choirmaster. We were proudly delighted, but adamant he should go only at the start of the next school year. Agreed. His current school marks were accepted. He was accepted. At 6 p.m. on Sunday, the 5th of January, 86, cheered away by family and locals in warm, cold duck sparkling wine, leaving the town in a power cut and a sandstorm, we three boarded the train in Lüderitz for a nostalgic 3 days and nights, just as Orty and I had each done to school in the 1950s. Orty from Windhoek to Stellenbosch, I from Livingston to Pietermaritzburg. At 7 p.m., the train got stuck in the sand for 2 hours near Coleman's Kop, dug out by a dozen labourers and 2 bulldozers until well after dark, like damming a river with a spade. The sand flowing fast under our carriage, while our new friends in the next compartment and I opened some welcome cold beers. By train from Lüderitz to Natal, January 86, recalled in 2020 in this doggerel. It is in highly ironic, satirical, heroic couplets. Hot ducks, cold beers, resounding cheers, our train awakes with squeals, katack on joints and points, on lurching rhythmic wheels. In sunset pastel plumes from dunes, mascaraed barkans wink, while sudden sprays of gusting sand wail eerie sounds in sync. Droll diamond digger ditties drifting up from Merchantal, Pomona moans, lost Shammai sighs for Coleman's Kop's last ball, and all the while Lawala's spirits dance the Grasplatt's capers, shoveling rivers of diamond dust in clouds of ghostly vapors. Brief sights of Halley's comet north of Jupiter, bright due west. As the sandblast fades, the dozers rest and workers wave with zest. Now grinding, squealing, straining, scraping loose of sand we speed across the desert, up the pass, from overburden freed. Our rusting see-through lifeline rails hum songs that call to mind the wailing ghosts of those who laid them, fading far behind. On arrival in the Drakensberg, we were invited to a braai by the choirmaster, Bunny Ashley Buchter. In casual conversation, he asked if we could suggest a theme for the school's Silver Jubilee year in 1988. I suggested a modern musical about Dias's journey, since Dias's crews were all male, like the boys' choir. I told him the Dias Festival would be spread across southern Africa and would have a Portuguese focus, hence a potential tour for the choir to Portugal. He jumped at the idea and asked, "But who do I get to write it?" My dear wife retorted, "Crispin." Would he? Ask him. He did. I did. Some extra lyrics and songs were added by the composer Howard Morgan and his wife Gay Lambert for a 1-hour, vibrant, modern musical, Sing a Song of Diaz. A magic year, 1987, ensued, dreams being fulfilled with lots of laughs and camaraderie, creative itches alone in our caravan in the park near the choir school, and even some sobs of happiness. I don't pretend that the selected lyrics to follow are poetry, but they had a gratifying effect on audiences around South Africa, Namibia to be, Portugal, and Madeira. It was the first such show the Rockies had ever done, and they did it with infectious enthusiasm. It was, incidentally, the only cultural activity that was allowed to be exported from South Africa that year. The choir school had been invited to Israel for a tour. That was because of the cultural boycott against sanctions. That was cancelled. They had arranged an exchange with a choir school in France. That was cancelled. They had arranged a tour of the United States. That was cancelled. But the one to Portugal went ahead because it was a Portuguese celebration, not a South African event. It was the first one of the Descobrimentes, the discoverers, which stretched on through Vasco da Gama and all the others for another 10 years. Ours was the first. And so they allowed that. Portugal was going to have nothing to do with any cultural boycott if their festival was going to be kiboshed in any way. The show begins with the crew reversing on stage, pulling ropes in time to the navigator's commentary as they head south. I won't sing it for you, but these were all sung in different voice parts. Hoist, 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 hoist the sails, cast off down below, farewell to Lisbon and southward ho, taste the wild Atlantic, ride the rolling swell, maybe there'll be monsters no man alive can tell. Sad, sad, sad the partings, for years or evermore, low, low the clouds above our homeland's fading shore, dark, dark the fears of pirates, bones and skulls, deep, deep the waters underneath our hulls. Trim, trim the sails, look lively down below, set course for Guinea and southward ho. Tall, tall the masts swinging round the clearing sky, far, far ahead soars an albatross on high. Full, full the sails, like our sweethearts' bosoms fair, sharp, sharp the sting and smack of salt spray everywhere. Wide, wide horizons, our goal a world away, bright, bright the stars that guide our southward way. Long, long the swells that heave our deck with ease, loud, loud the creak of oak in heavy seas. Trim, trim the sails, look lively down below, past Angra Pequena, but ever southward ho. High, high our hopes, our spirits soaring high, clear, clear the seagulls' piercing, raucous cry. There, there, yes, always there, the dolphins at our prow. Look, land, land on our left hand, turns to the northeast now. Trim, trim the sails, look lively down below. Africa has ended, and it's eastward ho. The PRO, the port ration officer, made sure all the crew and the numbers they met on the beach at Mossel Bay got drunk, of course. So he is arrested as a traitor and hauled before Diaz. You're a traitor, this again sung by Diaz and his senior captain, senior men. You're a public disgrace to your captain and your ship. You've totally ruined the point of this trip. You've got them so drunk they can't do a thing. You're a traitor, you wretch, to your nation and your king. You're drunk, disorderly, lazy and rotten, bloated, besoaked, beliquored and besotted. You've got them so drunk they can't trade a thing. You're a traitor, you wretch, to your nation and your king. You're a miserable, bone-headed idiot too, and all you can do is booze with the crew. You've got them so drunk they can't do a thing. You're a traitor, you wretch, to your nation and your king. You're a menace and no good, a soak and a wart. The sharks wouldn't touch you, so pickled in port. You're always so drunk you can't do a thing. You're a traitor, you wretch, to your nation and your king. You'll be keel-hauled and flogged with a cat o' nine tails, then walk the plank or be hanged from the sails. But perhaps you're so drunk you won't feel a thing. You're a traitor, you wretch, to your nation and your king. Drunk, disorderly, lazy and rotten, bloated, besoaked, liquored and besotted. You got them so drunk they can't do a thing. You're a traitor, you wretch, to your nation and your king. He is saved by a great storm arriving. Eventually, after raising a padrao at Quaihook, they turned back west, then north to find Angrapequena again, then home across uncharted waters. I was struck by our own political situation at the time, just as we were starting our final countdown to UNTAG and Namibia's independence. Hence the finale of my show. Don't look back. So many sunsets lie ahead to take us back where we belong. But our hope lies in the future. What we've done has made us strong. The past lies far behind us, like a wake that fades and dies, and whatever storms are waiting, we will survive. We will survive. So don't look back. Don't look back. We're heading for the future. Don't look back. Don't look back. Don't look back. We're heading for the future. Don't look back. Let's all learn of a great future, learning lessons from the past. What we've done will last for years, a noble tribute meant to last. So sing a song of bravery, praise to God for being alive. We will face what comes together and we'll survive. We will survive. So don't look back. Don't look back. We're on the right track. Don't look back. Don't look back. Don't look back. We're heading for the future. Don't look back. And at this point, I'd like to go totally off script. In January, February of 1990, just before independence, the interim administration under the Constituent Assembly issued an invitation to all in the country to present in a competition their ideas for a future flag for a future Namibia. So I was sitting there one day, doodling away, drawing various ideas. My wife was sitting across the table from me on our veranda, and she was busy, I think, doing our final bookkeeping, which she did at that stage. I did it later, but she did it then. And she was getting more and more frustrated and furious, I think, with me for having done such a bad job of bookkeeping. But then I was an English teacher, not a commercial teacher, and she was a commercial teacher. So anyway, sitting there doodling away, and she gets to the end of one thing, slams her pen down and says, "What are you doing anyway?" I, a bit sort of sheepish, had to say, "Well, actually, I'm just doodling with some ideas for a Namibian flag." She said, "I'll give you a Namibian flag." And she grabbed a scrap of paper, which I've still got, and literally grabbed a pen or pencil and just went chup, 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 and wrote letters. She wrote blue, white, red, blue, green. Sorry, blue, white, red, white, green. I said, "Oh, that's pretty. And what do they mean?" I said, "What do you mean? What do they mean?" I said, "What I mean is you have to give a logical explanation for everything, the symbol, the shape, the form of your flag. You have to give a description of it." So she said, "All right." And we discussed this for about an hour. And the next day I sent it in. What I sent in was that. All but the sun. Now, there were two others that won that competition, and I would love to acknowledge and recognize tonight Mr. Theo Jankowski. Please be upstanding. It's time you got the recognition you so you deserve. I still haven't seen your version or Don Stevenson's, the other one. Don Stevenson, I believe, was an American who had been resident here for many years, got to love the country, got a feel for it. Well, this I include in my poems because, if you don't mind, my wife's poem in the sky to Namibia. And Don's and Theo's. Thank you, Theo. You haven't had the recognition you deserve. He is the only surviving Namibian designer of our flag. And I think more should be made of him in future. Thank you, Theo. Thanks for coming. Thank you. Not part of my musical, but of my recently completed first draft book about our experiences linked to Bartholomew Dias are these 5 or 6 stanzas, which may be thought of as occasional poems on some of the elements in Bartholomew Dias's story, mostly written in 2018. Bartholomew Dias. You can visualize, I hope. Bare cracking hands on creaking rail you stand, hunched shoulders braced in South Atlantic waves from gales that flailed your sails for days on days, for months like eons, seeking men on land, past jungles, deserts, walls of dunes, dead pans. Don't slither, clamber vainly up this point, in swirling, stinging swell and spray and sand. Sail round your stormy cape and then anoint your limestone icons, heaved and braced by hand. And all the while, flamingos, cormorants and gulls, in constant foragings and flights, ignore those gales around your head of dreams. I'm often reminded how alike Bartholomew Dias and his little fragile vessels were to the first human landings on the moon. On the 19th of July, 1969, man's first landing on a different world. The Apollo schemes 11 to 14, with their moon landers, the Eagle, the Intrepid, the Falcon, Orion the Hunter, the Challenger, and above all, Apollo, the classical god of poetry and seafarers. Very fitting. Dias's Caravelle, San Cristobal and San Pantaleo, 1487-88. Swift, sleek, and sturdy, safe in reefs, explore, and test in tacks your carvel strakes and joints, all down this wild, uncharted, empty shore, across the bights and bays from points to points. Twin sloping masts absorb such blasts of gales that fail to shred your Christian lateen sails. Brave pair of saints that conquer stormy seas so far from home. Intrepid hunters' eagles, with brisk contempt you challenge a gale as breeze, and twisting ride the flow of wind like seagulls, or falcons learning distant stars to follow, your rigging singing paeans to Apollo. Dyer's Point. Bare, stark, Archean rock, you crouch alone, hunched shoulders smashed by South Atlantic storms, whose thunder-swell explosions, year on year on year, for eons, have hurled great boulder toys along, gouged gullies granite strewn around your feet. Seals sprawl again, again, again into the foam, to slither, clamber castle kings, to brave the next cruel swell. Beaks breaking breakers, dolphins surf the waves in joy, alerting lobsters loitering in swaying weeds, and all the while flamingos, cormorants, and gulls ignore the rage in constant foraging and flight around your head of dreams. Dyer's Point Foghorn House. Bare, brave, eccentric, wooden castle-like alone, tall, sturdy, stately, safe, serene, symmetrical, a harmony of form and place and aim and use. Stone pillars chain your walls against the swell, exploding up from south and west, while mists erupt in streaming, steaming, wispy, salty spray, like ancient seamen's spirit wraiths at Halifax that beckon ships aground unless you moaned, till storm swell swept your splinters into foam, while as before, flamingos, cormorants, and gulls ignore the mist in constant foraging and flight around your missing head of dreams. Dyer's Point Lighthouse, 1910 until it was abandoned in 1998. My wife was the last lighthouse keeper in Namibia at Dyer's Point. That came because teaching drove her up the wall, up the tower. She was not invited to go back to teach at Nautilus Secondary School in 1991. After 2 years of teaching very happily there, they, for some reason best known to themselves, did not invite her. And just when this is becoming serious financially for us, my son applied to the port captain who's in charge of the lighthouse, a friend of ours, for a job as a lighthouse keeper, cadet lightkeeper, when he matriculated at the end of that year. Well, that afternoon, after my son had flown back, leaving the letter with me to go down, he flew back to school in Port Elizabeth. And that afternoon, the portmaster came to me and he said, I got your letter, or Eric's letter. I don't think it's the job for him. Not good to isolate yourself as a young man just out of school. That would not be a good idea. Cut yourself off from society. No, not even to study, which was his intention. And he said, the second problem is I need a lighthouse keeper right now, because this morning our chief lighthouse keeper had taken 10 days leave up to his favorite fishing spot, Henty's Bay, and he had a massive heart attack on the beach this morning and he's passed away. I need to replace him today. Who could I ask? I said, I don't know. What about Auntie? He said, would she? I said, ask her. He did. She did. So teaching drove her up the tower, and she was the last one. She switched off Dyer's Point radio after I don't know how many decades of it serving the maritime community. She said goodbye to the last skipper, was one of her ex-pupils from St. Paul's. Ironic. Lovely coincidence of that. Dyer's Point Lighthouse. At one stage, there were three light keepers. There was Carla and her husband, Frank. They were entitled to each have a house. So Frank's house was our hobby and party house. And he built a catamaran in that house, and they lived in the house. We lived in the second house. And when Frank went off on holiday alone, which he occasionally did, we asked Sylvie, who's still a dear friend in Lüderitz. She had been working on the islands for 10 years, and now she had stopped working on the islands. She was a seamstress and did flowers as well. And so she was relatively free, and they asked her. She said, I'd be only too happy to. So she stood in for Frank as the third lighthouse keeper. 3 women. Now, women rule the world, yeah? I wrote an article about them for Flamingo for the Namibia In-Flight magazine, which was published. It was gratifying. And I called it Bikini Lighters. Bare, stark, and lonely, distant sign of us. You stand alone. Tall, phallic pharos proudly dominate your ridge. Your swinging arms of light light up the hills, brief flares of grey, bare rock and sand and sea, while safe in white, the sector light unblinking stares across the harbour roads towards the whistling buoy, to welcome home salt-grimed, sea-hardened men that know you all like family, familiar from afar. No longer needed now, you fading stand alone, and all the while flamingos, cormorants and gulls ignore your lights in constant foraging and flights around your head of dreams. Delighted to see they repainted it. Thank you, Namport. Compare, now imagine raising a limestone cross at Dyer's Point. Compare the crew raising the Lisbon limestone Padrão de Santiago Zebedeo on, hey-ho, 25th of July, 1488, 434 years ago today, 5 1/3 centuries ago. Compare the raising of that limestone Padrão, dragging it. First, you've got to get it off their little caravel into a little dinghy, row it ashore, and this thing weighs a ton, 900 kilograms or so. Row it ashore, then you get to tip it off into the surf, drag it, probably on a sealskin or something, drag it over the river there, the maritime river, and then up that slippery rock. Can you imagine dragging it up that? In any case, compare that with the raising of its Namibian dolerite replica, which hums when you pat it hard, lifted by helicopter at dawn on the 16th of April, 1988, the day after the passing away of my beloved father-in-law, Fritz Möhring, to whom I also quietly dedicated it as I placed a medallion with the profiles of Bartholomew Dias on the front and Adolf Lüderitz on the back under the replica as it was lowered into its niche on the rock. A gull is often to be seen perched on the cross. Dias Padrão and its replica. Bare, stark and lonely pillar in the mist, arms spread north-south, embracing gales and waves so far below, it seems as though this sea was always mild, despite wild dreams that smile at us now streaming sweat and smug, from hauling, cursing, nursing, tripping, slipping, foot by foot, and stumbling, fumbling, heavy, heaving boulders, firmly holding you, slick slithering down paths of salt and sliding guano slime, not like this hard new humming icon, swiftly lifted, whirling up to hands that guide it down at dawn. Meanwhile, flamingos, cormorants, and gulls ignore these sights, but one alights upon your head of dreams, named Fritz. In the 7 years we lived there, Orty and I buried several of our pets at the foot of the grave of the first lighthouse keeper at Dyer's Point, Theophil Pikacek, who drowned crossing the bays to town for supplies in 1903. Dyer's Point was known as a punishment station or penal point among the lightkeepers until quite recently. To us, it was a windy kind of heaven. We loved it. Dyer's Point Lightkeepers, 1903 to 1998. Bare, simple, stark, white headstone stands alone above old lonely Theophil, eccentric first of these. Poured recent friends at peace lie peaceful at his feet, still keeping watch across the harbour, bays and reefs. Forgotten now is Penal Point, as keeper generations fade. The final three bikini lighters, warm in wit and harmony, spoke brave across the waves from one small shack alone. Now keepers' lives at Dyer's Point drift deeper into memory, with views of vessels, dolphins, seals, and a porcupine, and all the while flamingos, cormorants, and gulls keep watch in constant foraging and flights around those heads of dreams. Let's go back to some cheerful stuff, shall we? Let's have a laugh. Quite often I was asked in Lüderitz to be master of ceremonies at a wedding. To Orty and me, that meant being creative, so we accumulated tattle tales about the bride and groom and put it all in rhyme, satirical doggerel if you like. They were, of course, intensely personal, so none are in this selection. But I remember fondly the laughs we had with and at Kevin Hill and Betten Schwiegers, Doris Rilk and Robin Weeks, and more recently, Nicole Sivertson and Alfonso Ferreira. I still have those scripts as evidence against them. I give them benefit of présent regardless and cheers. The same vein, I'm sad to see, I hoped that she was going to be here. Tracy Brown here? No, sad. She said she was going to be here. I found this card the other day, a card in rhyme for the daughter of Tracy Brown and Anton van Tonder, the Tooth Fairy. Hello, little person. Now don't be afraid. My name is Tooth Fairy. I've come, as they said. Your milk teeth are ready to pull and come out. So waggle them, push them, and then give a shout. It's out, come and get it. Put your tooth in my pouch, and tomorrow you'll find a surprise, but no ouch. For while you're asleep, I shall take it away to my secret palace, where all milk teeth play. 14/11/2014. 70 plus 10. So I made it to 70. My father lived to 102. He's the moving target. Well, well, I'm here. 70 plus 10. At half this age, I thought perhaps I'd make it here, and wrote a poem on good red wine, and not some film I could have seen alone. Tonight we watched some horror thing. Oh, sinister, so sinister, but bloody tripe it was. My apt red plonk was fine. 2/3 chilled water too. Now it's really here as these last minutes tick, and gone they are those years, all 69 plus 1. 1/3 still to go perhaps. So now I lift my usual glass and hope The first 2/3 of life have watered some good shoots of plants. Hope they have been, hope that I still shall be, that title of my first third song, fulfilled and satisfied in time, a special delivery. Hello 70, cheers, midnight, 14th November. That very day, the 15th, on my 70th, how brilliantly timed. The iconic Dyer's Point wooden bridge, opened in 1911, collapsed in a gale, aged 103, 1 year older than my father. It's also a target. Bare, brave, incongruous in seasoned wood, serene, symmetrical and sound you stood, astride the wide, brief surging, breaking seas, brought sacks of coal on keepers' backs with ease to fire the horn above, its house your mate, till purpose served, waves sealed its fate. You bore, when even keepers faded in the gloom, admiring strangers, till your own sad doom, your rotting wood, no match for gales, subsides, and all the while, flamingos, cormorants, and gulls ignore your plight in constant foraging and flights around your memory and dreams. And to replace it, my dream was, sadly it's got nowhere so far, was a rock art bridge. And there's the shape of the little stanza I wrote for it, representing a column. My dream, Dyer's Point Rock Arch Bridge. Imagine a rock arch bridge there made out of good old solid Lüderitz rock. Bare, boldly out of place and time you'll stride our bridge, in simple, graceful harmony of stature, symbol, style. Sturdy, safe, serene, eternally and proud above this ancient foaming flood of icy, swelling, surging seas that slide between your braced, impassive feet, immune to wind and wave and age, you'll stand for eons more in honor of visions of long ago, for now and evermore. Amen. Now we start getting, not itch, but yeah, curious and reflective. You, dare little I, who am afraid to name you, my be, all being, all beginning, all and end, all enduring, all endearing, all one alone, almighty, Alpha, magnificent, magnanimous, creator of all. Even this, my feeble attempt to praise you, yet if you made me make this, dare a little I, then call it feeble? And why do you need me to write this, but to teach me through this, and others through me through this, that you are all, and with one omega, good. My famous grandmother used to be not that, shall we say, structurally religious, wasn't a great churchgoer, but very spiritual. And she always said, anything that is good is of God, hence the last line of that one. This one is an itch. It's my curiosity, our curiosity. It's called No End Time. For 1,000 years in thy sight are but as yesterday when it is past, and as a watch in the night. Psalm 90. Thou hast made him a little lower than the angels. Psalm 90. We think, not even all of us, of 20 years ahead perhaps, and science fiction writers have been known to go 100 more. Occasionally, a cleric thinks of Christians in 1,000 years or two, and looking back, we think of man and celebrate the last year gone. A decade gets a festival, a century, a centenary. How many nations, tribes, or clans, or families can trace their roots? The most that most can boast about is only a millennium or two. How long has man in fact survived since time or earth or life began? Oh no, we only trace ourselves recorded through 10,000 years, though pictures on the caves go back some 30,000 years or so, and skulls and other bits of us in Africa, at any rate, are claimed by some of us to date at least 1,000,000 years or two. Big deal. Let's say it's 4 or 5 or even 10 for science sake. How much is that in terms of Earth, when even trees and vegetables like redwoods and velvetias that we see now were born with Christ? So what about the crocodile or coelacanth or cockroach then? Give each 100 million years or two. Have we evolved from Earth's old mush and mess of failed experiments and only wasted all God's time, or some at least, in making this blue flawed and freckled jewel Earth and all our planets, stones and stars in rings and necklaces for us, strung out in spreading galaxies through our known stretching universe in more dimensions than our 3 or 2. Our Earth, and all we know, has spent 5,000 million years or so from gas to this, to you, to me. And in that time, how many times did God think, that's the one I want, the perfect fish or bird or beast, till man, who has not yet been culled, but who might cull himself one day, or like God did with Noah's Ark, cut every species down to 1 or 2. Australopithecus is gone, the mammoth too, and soon the whale, the dinosaurs and fossil freaks that lasted several thousand years and several million years ago, and since have been recycled too as various forms of fuel or soil. Was each replaced, improved, or culled to leave a more efficient world? If so, when will our turn come? Or will we slowly be replaced by super hyper macro man within a generation now or two? If Earth has lived just half its life, will man survive its death and live perhaps on distant worlds near suns now only just or not yet born? Have we not just begun our time, still sitting in old Plato's cave and using only 10% of our unique, amazing brain and waiting for the rest of it to find its use? Are we not still the primitive and clumsy form of God's intended image Son within 1,000 million years or two? God gave the word, idea plus speech. Then Adam gave the self to us, and Noah saved our species once for Christ to show the proper way. So surely we can do the rest, survive these early days of life, and start to groom ourselves in depth for the awakening age ahead, when man will slowly learn to see within the next millennium or two. Where are we now? We've only been around and conscious of ourselves 10,000 years or so. What's that? How far we've come in that short time compared with, say, the elephant, who still plucks trees and wastes his world. And what about the birds and bees, or primogenital coelacanths, whose other offspring don't do much but swim and breathe and eat and breed, and all of them in all the seas, don't think or talk like one of us or two. So, what is immortality? The latest rag or fame at last, a monument above a grave, centennial fun and games perhaps, a Taj Mahal, a pyramid. Come, these are just tomorrow's blurbs. For if we wish to think ahead and plan a future for mankind, what point is there in thinking short when what we really should be at is planning for 1 billion years or two? So who are we to wipe us out with such a future lying ahead? We've come at least a little way towards the light in our short time. At least at last we care about such things as slaves and whales and trees and starving, homeless, hopeless kids and drugs and water, air and soil and human rights and cruelties and balances of greed and growth that were not issues in the mind 100 years or so ago or two. So put away your silly signs. The end's not near, nor the kingdom of God. Let's not yet presume to preempt his will, nor tempt him to cancel his testing of man, to create something else on a far distant world to replace us. Then let us return to the cave. Let's prove that we can pass the test. Already we are streets ahead for all our faults and backward steps of any other creature here in only 80 suns since Christ, and that is just an evening gone in time, a nanosec perhaps, or two. Let's spread ourselves through space and time, since now we can, not keep mankind, God's eggs, all in this basket earth, to give the lie to end time fears, and justify God's faith in man, and man's in God and in himself, to make it all worthwhile for both, and prove that man can live to raise towards that angel state and light 1,000,000,000 sons of sons, 1 billion generations more, or two. Nearing the end, dear friends, so time for a laugh. Du sublime au ridicule, il n'est qu'un pas. This is the end of my Luca script of 2017. Not only did I have fun at the old pub nights and gay 90s, I have had a lot of fun at the Lüderitz carnivals the last few years too. There again, it's poetry, doggerel in normally heroic couplets, as is traditional even in German. So in 2017, they were coming to the end of completing at last, after what, 20 years, our new railway line. And then the money bags, the bean counters in Winthrop decided, no, they're going to have to think again, because it's going to be unsustainable to have teams of workers clearing the sand off the railway line. They're going to have to build a tunnel for it, not for the sand, but for the railway line. Now our new railway line seemed nearly fit and fine to someday bring trains to our harbour, till financial bosses added sand clearing losses in the dunes around Grassplatz palaver, and decided against all advice from the Bucht on a tunnel just under the sand. How absurd was our view, but ignored, so what's new? At its price of R1,000,000,000. But one day a special train will sing a whimsical refrain, setting off at last a tourism boon. As our special spins its wheels, it will echo all the squeals of us Buchters, who will bellow out this tune to Loch Lomond. You can take the tar road, but we'll take the railroad, and you can be at Grassplatz before us, but we'll have a ball. On the Dune special train, as we practice our sand tunnel chorus. Stuff and nonsense, stuff and nonsense, stuff and nonsense. Oh, stuff and nonsense, stuff and nonsense, stuff and nonsense. In the soft and sunny sands around grass plots, they will still be shoveling sand as we're dancing to our band through the dunes linking coalments and grass plots. That sand tunnel dream will blow away like smoke or steam or the soft and shifting dunes around grass plots. Stuff and nonsense, stuff and nonsense. Oh, ooh, stuff and nonsense, stuff and nonsense. Soft and sunny sand around grass plots. Oh, hi, Luca. Ja, Lüderitzbucht. Ich habe gesucht für eine Heimat, die ich kann lieben. Immerzu, das bist du. Deswegen bin ich geblieben. Yeah, Lüderitz gives one the fits, but it's still our place to sing to. Vogelsang should have been hung for what he dropped us into. Guano. Now I'm afraid I have to get serious again. Nearly over. As I come to the end of my selection, I want to share a couple of thoughts with all those who have lost loved ones before their time, as my family did with our cousin Mike King in 1966. I was at college in West Wales in early December 66 when I got a call from my brother Robin. Our cousin Mike King had just qualified with honours from the Oxford Architecture College. His best friend, a Greek, invited him to tour Greece with him, a great treat to be shown that classical country by a trained architect. When they got to the capital, his friend had stuff to do, so suggested Mike take the ferry from Athens, port of Piraeus, to the island of Crete nearby to see its own ancient structures. Mike had a full day touring Crete, then caught a ferry back to Piraeus. I quote Wikipedia. The Greek passenger and choir ferry SS Heraklion, with 262 people on board, sank during a gale while attempting to cross the Aegean Sea. The ship was halfway between the island of Crete and the mainland port of Piraeus when the radio operator sent the emergency call at 2 in the morning. She was gone within an hour. Ultimately, 45 survivors were rescued. The other 217 went down with the ship. Interviews with survivors determined that the disaster had been caused by a 16-ton refrigerator truck being insufficiently secured inside the ferry. As the ship rocked violently in 70-mile-an-hour winds, cars and trucks broke from their fastenings and battered the loading doors. When the tractor-trailer became a monstrous battering ram, it tore open a door on the front of the ship. Water rushed in, sinking in Heraklion in only 15 minutes. Mike was last seen by survivors, whom he helped into a lifeboat. Then he disappeared. It was 4 more frantic days before we had news of him. It reminded me vividly of a dramatic poem by Gerard Manley Hopkins, The Wreck of the Deutschland, sunk off Kent, England, on the 7th December 1875, exactly 91 years beforehand. I quote, away in the lovable west, on a pastoral forehead of Wales, I was under a roof here, I was at rest, and they the prey of the gales, like me, Heraklion. Hope recedes, returns, recedes again, and dies, escaping from the numbness left behind. Recoiling from our uncontrolled, oh no, a desperate disbelief cries out the universal whys. Flitch mind of leering, overloaded seas, of howling spray in sleepless, stinging eyes. and of a wall of everlasting sea, and night submerging his last day. No hope, no trace, just gone. Oh God, why him of all? The storm of sudden horror slowly calms and leaves an empty, cold, and brooding sea. Helpless in our sympathy, hopeless in our misery, we treasure every memory of him, of vital red-haired laughter on a horse, of crazy canters, wind-lost shouted cracks, of peaceful, close, familiar homeward walks. How much we took for granted, life and friend. Also for Autie's cousin Walter's son Francois, killed on the Swakop Bridge after his matric farewell, and for my own dearest Autie, by self-inflicted lung cancer on the 25th of October 2021, ironically St. Crispin's Day. Remembering is a form of meeting again in sympathy. Not words, just words, but hearts and hands take yours. We grieve, yes, deeply, deeply, deeply. The sun slides out of sight, down deeper, deeper, deeper. So close, the warm, wet tide that tries to lift the dust. Don't ask why. Don't ask why. The night comes down too dark, too long till morning's slow grey light. The space, that empty space, slow fills with hesitating shafts of light. Those golden moments, memories that let you greet again, and then let go, then let go. Beyond. So when one dies, does one go on, or does one die and end and stop? Or does one really leave the here and now for somewhere further on? Does he or she, or is it go on beyond the sky, beyond the moon, beyond the planets and the sun, beyond the stars and galaxies, beyond Andromeda and on, beyond our worlds and universe, beyond black holes and gravity, beyond all future worlds as well, beyond dimensions, space and time, beyond existence, past all this, all is and was and will be too, and far beyond our intellect, do we go on and on and on, beyond all light, toward all light, to God? If so, dear loved one, fly now free, forever free of time and place, to meet again in memory and then in God. Amen. I would like to dedicate this evening to my late wife of 48 years, Autie, with a laugh which she enjoyed at the time. My Valentine's card to Autie, 1996. In a lighthouse by a stone cross, excavated through his mind, lived a writer, lucky blighter, and his keeper, Autie Line. Oh, my darling, oh, my darling, oh, my darling, Autie Line, I'd be useless, lost and rootless, but for you, my Valentine. There he sat nights till early mornings, casting pearls at future swine, drinking endless cups of coffee, now and then mature red wine. Oh, my darling, oh, my darling, oh, my darling, Autie Line, you're my constant inspiration. Won't you be my Valentine? When at last his books were published, selling millions, films in line, filthy rich, he bought the lighthouse, happy till the end of time. Oh, my darling, oh, my darling, oh, my darling, Ortoline. I'd be lonely, lost without you, oh, my darling, love of mine. Now I'll never be without you. Your eternal light will shine. And finally, yes, nearly done. Finally, my son and two families arrived from Germany this week to tour southern Namibia with me and kidnap me back to Germany and the UK in August and September. It reminds me of December 1972, when my beloved at the time, whom I married months later, let me visit my family in the UK for Christmas and gave me my present on the way to the airport. This. At that time, Southern African men would not be seen dead carrying a small bag. We always held the wife's handbag under strong protest as if it were or contained a hand grenade. So now I've got this thing and I always travel with it. My what's it? I call it my what's it? What is it? It's just a little bag with a zip. It's black, it's leather, and it's soft with a handle at the back. It's bigger than a pocket, but smaller than a trunk, and it's safer than a wallet if you clutch it when you're drunk. You can use it as a handbag, but it isn't quite the same, because handbags is for ladies, and this hasn't got a name. It isn't a tog bag. It isn't a purse. It isn't a briefcase, and satchel's worse. It isn't a suitcase. It isn't a grip. It isn't a sponge bag for a weekend trip. It isn't a glove bag nor a portmanteau. It's neither a hold-all nor a get-up-and-go. It's, I interrupt here. I invented rap. You didn't know that, did you? I invented rap. It was never published, so they never knew it was me, but rap is a decidedly African feature in the music scene. This is not put to music. Yes, I challenge somebody to put it to music, but the rap bit comes now. It's a ticket bag, passport bag, nothing like a carpet bag, a docket bag, pocket bag, grip side, wallet bag, diary bag, letter bag, traveler's checks and voucher bag, a zip top, flip top, grip top bag. It's a cousin to a kit bag, rucksack, haversack, a zipper sack, zip sack, trip sack, kip sack, a nip sack, border sack, travel sack, track sack, a custom sack, model sack, just a second, secret sack, a hand sack, bag sack, go sack, purse sack, wallet sack, cooler sack, a foot sack. That's all, folks. Thank you for being here. Laugh so bitch. Till next time, stay safe. Karaponawa, tot ziens, auf Wiedersehen. I challenge, thank you, thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your patience. I challenge photographers and illustrators to submit pictures from memory or their portfolios of elements in my poems for inclusion in my forthcoming books. When I get back from overseas, I shall be sassing out how we're going to arrange this. But I think it would be a nice idea, if my poems are ever published, to have suitable illustrations to go with them. Thank you. Let the party begin.
What a story. Wow. If we can just put the chairs on the outside so that we have space, and we have a sponsor for some snacks, and now it's time for the red wine and some face-to-face happy chat. And with this, I say thank you that you came.